At 19, Emily Rose Thompson had never imagined her life would change so drastically in a single afternoon. She sat in the faded blue armchair by the window of their small farmhouse in rural Kentucky, watching the golden wheat fields sway in the late summer breeze. Her notebook lay open on her lap, filled with poems she'd written about freedom, love, and dreams that seemed as distant as the mountains on the horizon. The old wooden floors creaked under her father's heavy footsteps as he paced back and forth in the living room, his weathered hands running through his graying hair. Thomas Thompson had been a proud man once, a farmer who had worked these lands for over 30 years, but the drought had been merciless, and the bank loans had piled up like autumn leaves after a storm. "Emily, honey, we need to talk." Her father's voice trembled as he spoke, and she could see the weight of the world in his tired blue eyes. She closed her notebook and turned to face him, her heart already sensing that whatever he was about to say would change everything. "What is it, Papa?" she asked softly, using the nickname she'd called him since childhood. The late afternoon. A sun streaming through the lace curtains cast shadows across his face, making him look older than his 55 years. Thomas sat heavily on the old sofa, his calloused hands clasped tightly together. "There's no easy way to say this, sweetheart. The bank, they're foreclosing on the farm next week. I've tried everything, sold everything I could, but it's not enough." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. This farm wasn't just their home, it was their entire world. 3 generations of Thompsons had worked this land, had built their dreams in these fields. But surely there must be something we can do. Maybe we could... "There is something," Thomas interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not what you think, and it's not what I ever wanted for you." The silence that followed felt heavier than the humid Kentucky air. Emily watched her father's face, seeing a mixture of shame and desperation that made her stomach turn. She had never seen him look so defeated, so broken. "There's a man," Thomas continued, unable to meet her eyes. "His name is Alexander Blackwood. He owns half the businesses in Louisville, maybe more. He's offered to help." Emily frowned, trying to understand. "Help how? Is he willing to loan us the money?" Thomas shook his head slowly, and when he finally looked at her, she saw tears threatening to spill from his eyes. "Not a loan, Emily. He wants you." The words hung in the air like a physical presence, and Emily felt the world tilt on its axis. "What do you mean he wants me?" "Marriage," Thomas whispered, the word falling from his lips like a stone into still water. "He's 38. Never been married, and he's willing to pay off all our debts, save the farm, and give you a life I could never provide. But Emily, I need you to know that I would never ever force you into this. If you say no, we'll find another way somehow." Emily stood up abruptly, her notebook falling to the floor with a soft thud. She walked to the window, pressing her palms against the cool glass. The fields that had been her sanctuary now felt like a prison, and the mountains in the distance seemed to mock her with their unreachable freedom. "What do you know about him?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Thomas cleared his throat. "He's from old money, built his empire from scratch after his family lost everything in some scandal years ago. They say he's ruthless in business, that he never forgives a debt or forgets a slight. But he's also fair, pays his workers well, and supports charities throughout the state. And he wants to marry me, a farm girl he's never met." "He's seen you," Thomas admitted reluctantly. "At the county fair last spring, you were reading poetry to the children by the old oak tree, remember? He was there on business, saw you, and apparently never forgot." Emily remembered that day vividly. She had been so happy, surrounded by laughing children, sharing her love of words and stories. The thought that someone had been watching her, studying her like a business transaction, made her skin crawl. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked, still staring out at the fields. "He's coming tomorrow evening to meet you properly and hear your answer. Emily, I want you to know that if you agree to this, it would be the greatest sacrifice anyone has ever made for this family. But if you can't do it, if you can't face a life with a stranger, I'll understand." Emily turned from the window, seeing her father's broken expression, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of their situation. This man who had taught her to ride horses, who had read her bedtime stories, who had encouraged her dreams of becoming a writer, was now asking her to give up everything for his mistakes. But as she looked around, their modest home, at the family photos on the mantel, at the worn furniture that held so many memories, she realized that this wasn't just about the farm. This was about her father's pride, his legacy, and the only life he had ever known. That night, Emily lay in her small bedroom under the eaves, staring at the ceiling as moonlight filtered through her curtains. She could hear her father moving restlessly in the room below, probably wrestling with the same demons that kept her awake. She thought about Alexander Blackwood, this mysterious man who apparently held their fate in his hands. What kind of person? Collected debts through marriage proposals? What kind of life would she have with someone she didn't know, didn't love, and apparently should fear? But then she thought about her father's face, about the farm that meant everything to him, about the generations of Thompsons who had poured their hearts into this land. Could she really let it all disappear because she was afraid of the unknown? As dawn approached, Emily made her decision. She would meet Alexander Blackwood, look him in the eye, and try to understand what kind of man would make such an unusual arrangement. Maybe there was more to this story than her father knew. Maybe there was hope for something more than just a business transaction disguised as a marriage. The next evening arrived far too quickly. Emily had spent the day trying to prepare herself, choosing her best dress, a simple blue cotton that matched her eyes, and braiding her long auburn hair into a neat coil at the nape of her neck. She looked in the mirror and saw a young woman trying to be brave, trying to hide the fear that churned in her stomach like a summer storm. The sound of expensive car tires on their gravel driveway announced his arrival. Emily watched from her bedroom window as a sleek black Mercedes pulled up to their modest home. The contrast was stark, luxury meeting simplicity, power meeting vulnerability. The man who stepped out of the car was not what she had expected. Alexander Blackwood was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her father made in 6 months. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and even from a distance she could see the confidence in the way he carried himself. But it was his face that surprised her most. She had expected someone harsh, cold, calculating. Instead, she saw sharp, intelligent features softened by what looked almost like uncertainty. When he looked up at the house, scanning the windows, she stepped back quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Emily," her father called from downstairs, his voice tight with nervousness. "He's here." She took a deep breath, smoothed her dress one last time, and walked downstairs to meet the man who might become her husband. As she reached the bottom step, she could hear voices in the living room, her father's nervous chatter and a deeper, more resonant voice that seemed to command attention without effort. When she entered the living room, Alexander Blackwood rose from the sofa with fluid grace. Their eyes met across the small space, and Emily felt something unexpected, not fear, but curiosity. His eyes were a striking grey-green, like storm clouds over water, and they studied her with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and somehow protected. "Miss Thompson," he said, his voice carrying just a hint of a southern accent softened by years of education and travel. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Mr. Blackwood," she replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I understand you have a proposition to discuss." Alexander Blackwood gestured toward the chair across from him, waiting until Emily was seated before settling back onto the sofa. The living room suddenly felt smaller with his presence filling it, like a wolf entering a sheep's pen, though Emily couldn't shake the feeling that despite his obvious power, he wasn't there to devour anyone. "I imagine your father has explained the basic terms of my proposal," Alexander began, his hands clasped loosely in his lap. Emily noticed they were strong hands, with a small scar across the knuckles of his right hand that spoke of a life not entirely spent behind a desk. "He has," Emily replied, lifting her chin slightly, "though I confess I find it unusual for business. Arrangements to involve marriage." A ghost of a smile crossed Alexander's lips. "Direct, I appreciate that quality." He glanced at Thomas, who sat rigidly in his recliner, then back to Emily. "You're right to find it unusual. Perhaps I should explain my reasoning." Emily folded her hands in her lap, mirroring his posture unconsciously. "Please do." Alexander was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've spent the last 15 years building my business empire, Miss Thompson. In that time, I've learned that everything worthwhile requires sacrifice and commitment. I've also learned that I'm not naturally suited to the traditional courtship process." "You mean you're not romantic?" Emily said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Among other things," he agreed, seemingly unbothered by her bluntness. "I'm told I can be intimidating, overly focused on work, and lacking in the social graces that most women find appealing. However, I find myself at a point in my life where I require a wife." "Require?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "Like a business asset?" "Like a partner," Alexander corrected gently. "Someone who can handle the social aspects of my position, someone intelligent enough to hold meaningful conversations, someone who won't be easily overwhelmed by the complexities of my world." Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Emily, you don't have to—" "I can speak for myself, Papa," Emily said softly, not taking her eyes off Alexander. "Mr. Blackwood, what makes you think I possess these qualities you're looking for?" Alexander leaned forward slightly, his intense gaze fixed on her face. "I watched you at the county fair, Miss Thompson. You handled a group of restless children with patience and creativity, turning their energy into engagement with poetry of all things. When one little boy became upset because he couldn't read the words you'd written, you didn't dismiss him or try to placate him. You sat with him and helped him sound out each letter until he could read the entire verse himself." Emily felt heat rise to her cheeks. The memory was precious to her, but hearing it recounted by this stranger felt both invasive and somehow intimate. "You were watching me for quite some time, then?" "Long enough to recognize intelligence, compassion, and strength," Alexander replied. "Three qualities that would serve both of us well in this arrangement." "And what exactly would this arrangement entail?" Emily asked, surprised by her own boldness. Alexander glanced again at Thomas, who gave a small nod. "Your father's debts would be paid in full immediately. The farm would remain in your family's name, with enough additional funds to ensure its prosperity for years to come. You would become my wife and move to my estate in Louisville, where you would have access to education, travel, and resources to pursue your interests, including your writing." Emily's heart skipped. "You know about my writing? Your poetry? Impressed me that day. I made some inquiries and learned that you've been published in several local journals. I believe talent should be nurtured, not buried under financial necessity." The offer was more generous than Emily had dared to hope, but something in his clinical presentation bothered her. "And what would you expect from me in return?" "Companionship, intelligence, discretion." Alexander paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "I should be clear about one thing, Miss Thompson. This would be a marriage in name and legal standing, but I wouldn't expect intimate relations unless and until both parties desired them." The blush that had been warming Emily's cheeks now spread down her neck. She appreciated his frankness, but the careful way he phrased it made her wonder about his past. "That's very considerate of you." "I'm a businessman, not a monster," Alexander said quietly. Despite what some people might say, there was something in his tone that made Emily lean forward slightly. "What do people say?" Alexander's expression hardened. "That I'm ruthless, that I destroy anyone who crosses me, that I've never shown mercy to a debtor or competitor." He met her eyes directly. "Some of those things are true, but I've never harmed anyone who didn't harm me first, and I've never taken advantage of someone weaker than myself." "Then why the reputation?" "Because fear is an effective business tool," Alexander replied. "When people are afraid to cheat, to lie to you, or to break their agreements with you, it saves everyone time and trouble in the long run." Emily studied his face, trying to read between the lines of what he was telling her. There was something beneath the surface, some pain or loss that he wasn't sharing. "Mr. Blackwood, may I ask why you've never married? Surely a man of your position has had opportunities." The question seemed to hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, his carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. "I was engaged once," he said finally. "Several years ago. It didn't end well." "I'm sorry," Emily said softly, and she meant it. Whatever had happened, it had clearly left deep scars. "It taught me valuable lessons about the importance of honest expectations and clear agreements," Alexander continued, his composure returning. "Which brings me to an important point. I won't lie to you, Miss Thompson, and I hope you'll extend me the same courtesy. This arrangement, if you agree to it, would be built on mutual respect and honesty, not romantic illusions." Emily felt a strange mix of disappointment and relief. Part of her had always dreamed of the kind of sweeping, passionate love she read about in novels, but another part of her, the practical part shaped by years of watching her parents struggle, recognized the value of security and respect. "I'd like to know more about your world," Emily said after a long pause. "What would my daily life look like? What would be expected of me socially?" Alexander seemed to relax slightly at her practical questions. "You'd have your own suite of rooms in my home, complete privacy when you desire it. There would be social obligations, charity events, business dinners, community functions. You'd need a wardrobe appropriate to these occasions, which would be provided. You'd have access to a car and driver, an allowance for personal expenses, and complete freedom to pursue your writing." "And children?" Emily asked, then immediately regretted the question when she saw the way Alexander's expression tightened. "That would be among a discussion for the future," he said carefully, "if the situation arose." Emily nodded, filing away yet another hint about his past pain. "Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate your honesty and your generous offer, but I need time to consider this decision properly." "Of course," Alexander stood, smoothing his suit jacket. "How much time do you need?" "A week," Emily said, surprised by her own decisiveness. "Fair enough." Alexander pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. "My private number is on the back. If you have any questions or if you'd like to see the estate before making your decision, please don't hesitate to call." As he moved toward the door, Emily found herself standing as well. "Mr. Blackwood?" He turned back to her, one eyebrow raised questioningly. "Why me?" she asked. "Really? With your resources, you could have anyone. Why choose someone you've only seen once, someone from a world so different from yours?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if memorizing it. "Because," he said finally, "when I watched you with those children, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine joy. Not the calculated happiness of someone trying to gain something, not the performance of someone playing a role. Just pure, unguarded joy in sharing something beautiful with others." He paused. "I realized I wanted that in my life, even if I could never fully understand it." With that, he nodded to Thomas and left, the sound of his expensive car fading into the evening silence. Emily stood at the window watching his taillights disappear down the country road. Her father approached slowly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "What are you thinking, sweetheart?" Emily leaned against him, drawing comfort from his familiar presence. "I'm thinking that Alexander Blackwood is not at all what I expected." "Is that good or bad?" "I honestly don't know," Emily admitted, "but I think I need to find out." 3 days later, Emily found herself dialing the number on Alexander's business card. Her hands trembled slightly as she listened to the phone ring, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. "Blackwood," his voice was crisp and professional. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Emily Thompson." The change in his tone was immediate, becoming warmer and more attentive. "Miss Thompson, I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. I'd like to take you up on your offer to see the estate," Emily said, twisting the phone cord around her finger. "If the invitation still stands." "Of course it does. When would be convenient for you?" "Tomorrow, if possible." "I'll send a car for you at 10 o'clock. The next morning, Emily stood in front of her mirror, second-guessing her choice of outfit for the 3rd time. She'd finally settled on a simple green dress that her mother had always said brought out her eyes. Her mother, who had been gone for 5 years now, but whose voice Emily still heard in moments of uncertainty. The car that arrived was not the Mercedes from before, but a sleek black sedan with a professional driver who introduced himself simply as James. The ride to Louisville took nearly 2 hours, giving Emily plenty of time to second-guess her decision and imagine various scenarios for how the day might unfold. As they turned through impressive iron gates and up a curved driveway lined with ancient oak trees, Emily's breath caught in her throat. The Blackwood estate was magnificent, a sprawling Georgian mansion of red brick and white columns that spoke of old money and established power. Perfectly manicured gardens stretched as far as the eye could see, with fountains and walking paths that looked like something from a magazine. Alexander was waiting on the front steps as the car pulled up, dressed more casually than before in dark slacks and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked younger somehow, less intimidating though no less impressive. "Miss Thompson," he said, opening her door himself before James could move. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor." "It's beautiful," Emily said honestly, accepting his offered hand as she stepped out of the car. "How long has it been in your family?" "Actually, it hasn't," Alexander replied, his expression tightening slightly. "I bought it 5 years ago and had it restored. The original Blackwood estate was lost some time ago." Another piece of the puzzle that was Alexander Blackwood, Emily thought, filing the information away with all the other hints he'd dropped about his past. The tour of the house was overwhelming. Room after room of polished hardwood floors, crystal, chandeliers and artwork that Emily suspected was worth more than her father's farm. Alexander showed her the library first, a 2-story room lined floor to ceiling with books, complete with a rolling ladder and comfortable reading nooks by tall windows. "This is incredible," Emily breathed, running her fingers along the leather spines of first-edition classics. "Have you read all of these?" "Most of them," Alexander replied, watching her face as she explored. "I spend a lot of evenings in here. It's peaceful." "Lonely, you mean," Emily said without thinking, then immediately regretted her directness. But Alexander didn't seem offended. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "Lonely." He showed her the music room with its grand piano, the conservatory filled with exotic plants, and finally, the suite of rooms that would be hers if she agreed to his proposal. The bedroom was larger than her family's entire living room, with its own sitting area, walk-in closet and bathroom that looked like something from a luxury hotel. "The door between your suite and mine can be locked from either side," Alexander explained, his tone carefully neutral. "Your privacy would be completely respected." Emily nodded, trying not to think about what lay beyond that door, what his private spaces might reveal about the man behind the careful facade. After the house tour, Alexander led her through the gardens. They walked in comfortable silence, for a while following winding paths past rosebeds and reflecting pools. Finally, they reached a secluded gazebo overlooking a small lake where a simple lunch had been set out for 2. "This is my favorite spot on the property," Alexander said, holding her chair as she sat. "It's peaceful here." As they ate, Emily found herself relaxing in his company. Away from the formality of their first meeting, Alexander was easier to talk to, more human. He asked thoughtful questions about her writing, her dreams, her thoughts, on books they'd both read. When she mentioned her mother's passing, he listened with genuine sympathy, sharing brief glimpses of his own losses without dwelling on the details. "May I ask you something?" Emily said as they finished their meal. Of course. "The woman you were engaged to, what happened?" Alexander's fork paused halfway to his mouth, and for a moment Emily thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his utensil and looked out over the lake. "Her name was Victoria," he said quietly. "We met at a charity function in Nashville. She was beautiful, charming, everything a man in my position was supposed to want. We were engaged for 8 months. What went wrong?" "I discovered that she was already married," Alexander said, his voice emotionless. "Had been for 3 years to a man she claimed was her brother. She was after my money to pay off her husband's gambling debts. When I confronted her, she laughed and said I was naive to think someone could actually love me for myself." Emily felt a surge of anger on his behalf. "That's horrible. I'm so sorry. It taught me not to trust romantic gestures or declarations of love," Alexander continued. It also taught me to value honesty above all else in personal relationships. Is that why you're approaching marriage like a business contract? Alexander met her eyes directly. Yes, at least this way we both know exactly what we're getting into. No illusions, no deceptions, no heartbreak when reality doesn't match the fantasy. Emily understood now why he seemed so guarded, why he kept such careful control over his emotions. Victoria had wounded him in a way that went deeper than just betrayal. She had attacked his ability to trust his own judgment about people. "Mr. Blackwood, Alexander," she said, using his first name for the first time. "I want you to know that I would never deceive you about my motivations. I won't pretend to love you when I don't, but I also won't pretend to be indifferent to your well-being. If I agree to this marriage, I'll be committed to making it work." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a wall coming down just slightly. "Thank you for that," he said. "It means more than you might realize." That evening, back at the farm, Emily sat with her father on the front porch as fireflies danced in the gathering dusk. She had told him about the estate, about her conversations with Alexander, about the growing sense that this arrangement might be more than just a business transaction. "He's not what I expected," Emily said, echoing her words from a few days earlier. "Better or worse?" Thomas asked. "Different. Wounded but trying to heal. Lonely but too proud to admit it. Generous but afraid to trust." "Sounds like he needs someone to believe in him," Thomas observed. "Maybe," Emily agreed. "And maybe I need someone who will support my dreams without trying to change me." "So you've decided?" Emily was quiet for a long moment, listening to the familiar sounds of crickets and wind through the wheat. "I think I have," she said finally. "I'm going to say yes." 2 weeks later, Emily Rose Thompson stood in the small chapel of Blackwood Manor, wearing a simple but elegant white dress that Alexander had chosen with surprising good taste. The ceremony was small, just her father, Alexander's business partner and best man, and a handful of household staff who had become dear to Alexander over the years. As they exchanged vows, Emily found herself looking into Alexander's storm-grey eyes and seeing something she hadn't expected: hope. Not love, not yet, but hope that maybe this unusual arrangement might lead to something neither of them had dared to imagine. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander's kiss was brief and respectful, but Emily thought she felt his hand tremble slightly as it touched her cheek. The reception was held in the garden, with champagne and cake and toasts from the small gathering. Emily's father walked her around the grounds one last time as her husband spoke quietly with his business associates. "Are you happy, sweetheart?" Thomas asked, his voice thick with emotion. Emily considered the question seriously. "I'm hopeful. Papa, I think that's enough for now." That night, as she prepared for bed in her beautiful new suite, Emily found a single white rose on her pillow with a note written in Alexander's precise handwriting. "Thank you for taking a chance on an unconventional arrangement. I hope in time we can build something meaningful together. May." She pressed the rose between the pages of her journal, next to a poem she had written that morning about new beginnings and unexpected paths. Through the locked door that separated their rooms, she could hear Alexander moving around, probably as nervous as she was about this strange new chapter of their lives. As she settled into the enormous bed, Emily realized that for the first time in months, she wasn't worried about the future. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she was no longer facing it alone. And somehow that felt like the beginning of something that might eventually become beautiful. 6 months into their marriage, Emily had settled into a rhythm at Blackwood Manor that surprised her with its contentment. Her days were filled with writing, charitable work, and the social obligations that came with being Alexander's wife. She had discovered that beneath his intimidating reputation, her husband was respected and even beloved by many in the community for his quiet generosity and fair business practices. Their relationship had evolved into something comfortable, almost friendship-like. They shared meals, discussed books, and attended social functions together with an ease that felt natural. Alexander had kept his word about respecting her privacy, never pressuring her for more than she was ready to give. But Emily had begun to notice small things. The way his eyes lingered on her face when he thought she wasn't looking, the protective way he positioned himself at social gatherings, the gentle tone he used when they were alone. It was on a crisp October evening that everything changed. Emily was in the library, curled up in her favorite chair by the fireplace, when Alexander burst through the doors with an urgency she had never seen in him before. "Emily, we need to talk," he said. His usually composed demeanor cracked with something that looked like panic. She set down her book, immediately concerned. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Alexander ran his hands through his hair. A gesture she'd learned meant he was deeply troubled. "I've received some information about Victoria, my former fiancée. She's been spreading lies about you, about our marriage." Emily felt her stomach clench. "What kind of lies?" "She's telling people that you're just like her, that you married me for money and are planning to leave once you've gotten what you want. She's even convinced some of my business associates that you're already having an affair." The accusations hit Emily like physical blows. "Alexander, you know that's not true. I would never—" "I know," he said quickly, crossing the room to kneel beside her chair. "Emily, I know you would never betray me like that. But the problem is, some people are starting to believe her. My business partner, Robert, came to me today warning me to protect my assets. Even some of the household staff are looking at you differently." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. In the months since their wedding, she had worked hard to build relationships with Alexander's associates and staff. The thought that her reputation was being destroyed by a woman she'd never even met was devastating. "Why is she doing this?" Emily whispered. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Because she found out about our marriage and realized that she'd lost her chance to manipulate me again. Victoria is the kind of person who can't bear to see others happy when she's not." "What are we going to do?" Alexander took her hands in his, and Emily was surprised by how warm and steady they were. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have said months ago." Emily's heart began to race. "What is it?" "I love you," Alexander said, his voice raw with honesty. "I've been in love with you since our wedding day, maybe since that first afternoon when you challenged me with such courage. I've been too afraid to say it, too afraid to trust these feelings, but I can't stay silent anymore." Emily stared at him, speechless. Of all the things she had expected him to say, this was not one of them. "I know our arrangement wasn't supposed to include love," Alexander continued, "and I know you didn't marry me for romantic reasons. But Emily, when I think about losing you, about these lies destroying what we've built together, I realize that I can't pretend anymore. You've become everything to me." Tears were flowing freely down Emily's cheeks now. "Alexander, I'm not asking you to say it back," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know that whatever happens, whatever people say about us, you have transformed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've brought light into a world that had become cold and empty." Emily reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight roughness of his 5 o'clock shadow, seeing the vulnerability in his storm-grey eyes. "You foolish, wonderful man," she whispered. "Did you really think I could live in your house, share your life, see your kindness and intelligence and hidden gentleness, and not fall in love with you?" Alexander's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you too," Emily said, laughing through her tears. "I've been fighting it for months, telling myself it was just gratitude or comfort or companionship. But it's love, Alexander. Deep, real, terrifying love." The kiss that followed was nothing like their chaste wedding kiss. It was passionate and desperate, and full of months of suppressed emotion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to fight this together," he said firmly. "Victoria won't destroy what we have." "How?" Emily asked. Alexander's expression hardened with determination. "By showing everyone exactly who you really are. I'm going to throw the biggest charity gala this city has ever seen, and you're going to be the guest of honor. We'll invite everyone, business associates, society leaders, local media. You'll give a speech about your literacy program for underprivileged children, and people will see the woman I fell in love with. Emily felt a flutter of nerves. Alexander, I'm not sure I'm ready for something that public. You are, he said with complete confidence. Emily, you're the strongest, most genuine person I've ever known. When people see you, really see you, they'll understand that Victoria's lies are exactly that, lies. The gala took place 3 weeks later in the grand ballroom of Louisville's most prestigious hotel. Emily had never seen anything like it. Hundreds of guests in elegant evening wear, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables adorned with white roses and gold accents, a string quartet playing softly in the background. Emily wore a midnight blue gown that Alexander had chosen for her, simple but stunning, that made her auburn hair glow like fire. As they moved through the crowd together, she could feel eyes on them, whispers following in their wake. Some faces were friendly, others curious, and a few openly skeptical. There she is, Alexander murmured, nodding toward a corner of the room where a striking blonde woman stood surrounded by a small group of listeners. Victoria. Emily studied her husband's former fiancée with fascination and dislike. Victoria was undeniably beautiful, with the kind of polished perfection that came from expensive salons and designer clothes. But there was something cold in her blue eyes, something calculating in the way she gestured as she spoke. She's beautiful, Emily said honestly. She's poison, Alexander replied grimly. Come on, let's show everyone what real beauty looks like. When Emily took the stage to give her speech about the literacy program, her hands were shaking. She looked out at the sea of faces, some encouraging, others waiting to judge her. Then she found Alexander's eyes in the crowd, saw the love and pride there, and felt her nerves settle. 6 months ago, Emily began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, I was a small-town girl who had never imagined I would stand before you tonight. But sometimes life takes us on unexpected journeys, and we discover strengths we never knew we had. She spoke about the children she worked with, about the transformative power of literacy, about the joy of watching a struggling reader finally understand that the marks on a page could tell stories that would change their world. As she talked, Emily could see the audience becoming more engaged, the skeptical expressions softening into genuine interest. My husband taught me that true power isn't about intimidation or wealth or reputation, Emily continued, her eyes finding Alexander. Again, true power is about lifting others up, about using your blessings to create opportunities for those who haven't had the same advantages. That's the kind of power I want to be part of. The applause when she finished was thunderous. Emily saw Victoria's face in the crowd, saw the anger and frustration there as people turned away from her little group to congratulate Emily. Several prominent business leaders approached the stage, eager to discuss partnerships with the literacy program. But the real victory came later, during the dancing portion of the evening. As Alexander led Emily onto the dance floor, she could hear fragments of conversations around them. People praising her speech, commenting on how genuine and caring she seemed, how obvious it was that she and Alexander were truly devoted to each other. You were magnificent, Alexander whispered as they swayed to a slow waltz. Absolutely magnificent. I had good motivation, Emily replied, looking up into his eyes. I wanted to make you proud. You did more than that, Alexander said. You made me realize what I've been missing all these years. A true partner, someone who makes me want to be better than I am. As the music played and they held each other close, Emily felt Victoria's presence at the edge of the dance floor, watching them with undisguised hatred. But for the first time, Emily wasn't afraid. She had something Victoria would never understand. Genuine love built on respect and trust and shared dreams. The confrontation came the next morning. Emily was in the garden, tending to the roses that had become her special project, when Victoria appeared on the path like an elegant predator. So you're the little farm girl who thinks she can replace me, Victoria said, her voice like honey, laced with acid. Emily straightened slowly, dirt still on her gardening gloves, and met Victoria's gaze steadily. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm trying to build something new. With my man, Victoria spat. Alexander hasn't been your man for years, Emily replied calmly. From what I understand, he never really was. Victoria's beautiful face twisted with rage. You don't know what you're talking about. Alexander and I have a connection you could never understand. When he gets tired of your innocent act, he'll come back to me. I don't think he will, Emily said quietly, because what we have isn't an act, it's real. You're deluding yourself, Victoria laughed harshly. Men like Alexander don't fall in love with girls like you. They use you and discard you when something better comes along. Emily felt a flare of anger, but kept her voice steady. I'm sorry. You believe that? It must be a very lonely way to live, thinking that love is always just manipulation. Love is manipulation, Victoria snarled. And money is the only thing that matters. At least I'm honest about it. No, Emily said firmly. Love is what I saw in Alexander's eyes when he watched me work with those children. Love is what made him kneel beside my chair to comfort me when you tried to hurt me with your lies. Love is what made him throw that gala, not to show me off like a possession, but to give me a platform to do work that matters to me. Victoria stared at her for a long moment, and Emily saw something almost like pain flicker across her face. You really believe that, don't you? I know it, Emily said softly, and I think part of you knows it too. I think that's why you're so angry, because you had a chance for something real with Alexander, and you threw it away for money that wouldn't have made you happy anyway. You don't know anything about me, Victoria whispered, but her voice had lost its venom. I know you're hurting, Emily said gently. I know you're alone, and I know that trying to destroy what Alexander and I have won't fix whatever broke inside you. Victoria's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the wounded, desperate woman underneath. He loved me once, she said, her voice breaking. Before he found out about Marcus, before everything went wrong, he really loved me. Then why did you betray him? Because I was scared, Victoria admitted. Because I thought if he knew the real me, all my debts, all my mistakes, all my failures, he would leave anyway. So I decided to take what I could before he figured out I wasn't worth loving. Emily felt an unexpected surge of compassion. Victoria, Alexander is a good man. If you had been honest with him— It's too late for that, Victoria said, the walls going back up. He'll never forgive me, and I can't blame him. She looked at Emily with something that might have been respect. Take care of him. He deserves better than what I gave him. With that, Victoria turned and walked away, her designer heels clicking on the stone path. Emily watched her go, feeling sad for the woman who had let fear destroy her chance at happiness. That evening, Emily told Alexander about the confrontation. They were sitting in their favorite spot in the gazebo, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. She's leaving Louisville, Alexander said after Emily finished her story. Robert saw her at the airport this afternoon with several suitcases. I actually feel sorry for her, Emily admitted. I think she really did love you in her own damaged way. Alexander took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Maybe. But Emily's what she felt for me was possessive and selfish. What we have is completely different. It's built on trust and respect, and the desire to help each other become better people. Is that what love is supposed to be? Emily asked, leaning against his shoulder. I think so, Alexander replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I think love is supposed to make you braver, not more afraid. It's supposed to make you want to give, not just take. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Finally, Emily spoke up. Alexander, there's something I need to tell you. He tensed slightly. What is it? Emily smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. I'm pregnant. Alexander's reaction was everything Emily could have hoped for. His eyes widened with wonder, then filled with tears as he pulled her into his arms. Are you sure? He whispered against her hair. I saw the doctor yesterday, Emily confirmed. About 6 weeks along. Alexander pulled back to look at her face, his expression full of awe and love and something that looked like fear. "Emily, I don't know how to be a father. My own father wasn't a good example." "Then we'll learn together," Emily said, touching his cheek gently. "We'll make sure our child knows they're loved and wanted and supported in their dreams." "Our child," Alexander repeated wonderfully as if testing out the words. "Emily, I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes." "I love you too," she replied, pulling him down for a kiss. "And I'm not terrified anymore. I'm excited." 9 months later, Emily held their daughter in her arms while Alexander sat beside her hospital bed, looking completely overwhelmed by the tiny person they had created together. Little Sarah Blackwood had her father's grey-green eyes and her mother's auburn hair, and she had already managed to wrap both parents completely around her tiny finger. "She's perfect," Alexander whispered, gently touching the baby's cheek with one finger. "She's ours," Emily replied, feeling tears of joy slip down her cheeks. Looking back, Emily realized that the scared 19-year-old girl who had agreed to marry a stranger to save her father's farm could never have imagined the life she had now. What had started as a business arrangement had become the greatest love story of her life. Alexander had kept all his promises and more. Emily's literacy program had expanded to serve 3 counties, and her poetry had been published in a collection that was gaining national attention. The farm was thriving under her father's care, and he visited often to spoil his granddaughter. But more than the material success, Emily treasured the quiet moments, reading together in the library, working in the garden while Sarah played. At their feet, the way Alexander's face lit up when he came home to find his girls waiting for her. "No regrets?" Alexander asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching Sarah chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "None," Emily replied without hesitation. "You." Alexander pulled her closer, his voice warm with contentment. "Only that it took so long to tell you I loved you." Emily laughed, thinking of their long journey from suspicious strangers to devoted partners to parents. Some things are worth waiting for. As Sarah's laughter echoed across the gardens of Blackwood Manor, Emily realized that fairy tales didn't always begin with once upon a time. Sometimes they began with a desperate father, an impossible debt, and 2 wounded hearts brave enough to trust in the possibility of love. Theme de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope Emily and Alexander's story has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. Love often comes when we least expect it, in forms we never imagined, and sometimes it takes courage to recognize it when it appears. Their journey, from a business arrangement to true partnership, reminds us that the best relationships are built on trust, respect, and the willingness to see beyond surface appearances. If this story moved you, we've prepared a special playlist of equally captivating tales about unexpected love and second chances. You can find it by clicking to your left. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you these unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships every single day. We love hearing from you, so please, share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Emily and Alexander's unusual beginning? Have you ever found love in an unexpected place? Your stories inspire our next chapters.